introduction of Node.js. So another framework like AngularJS is used on the client side. Uh, it is based on JavaScript. Another framework for the JavaScript is Node.js, but Node.js is predominantly used on the server side, right? It is JavaScript which is created on the server side to handle client requests. Okay. Now, what we can perform with Node.js, like whatever is performed with the help of JavaScript, except file opening. Uh, JavaScript on the client side was not able to handle files, or it should not handle files ideally because it should not have access to the local memory. But since Node.js is working on the server side, uh, it can perform all the file related operations because it want to provide service from the server, right? So Node.js can be used to create dynamic page content. Then it can perform all the file related operations on the server side. It can collect the form data from the client and process that data on the server, like we performed in the case of servlets and JSP. Same can be done with Node.js. And also we can interact and perform all the database transactions like adding, deleting, modifying the database, right? All the server side operations can be performed in Node.js also. Fine. So what will be a part of the Node.js file? So firstly, uh, it will contain the task that will be executed when a certain event occurs, and typically that event is a particular port is being accessed. For example, port 8080 is being accessed whenever we target a Node.js file over the HTTP protocol, right? So whenever a certain event occurs, at that time the tasks present in the Node.js file will get triggered. Okay. Then the file must always be initiated on the server. Uh, that means your .ns file should be in an active state well before any event occurs. Understood? So that once the event occurs, it will be able to, it is already initialized and it will be able to handle that event properly. I mean, it will be able to handle the client request properly. Okay. And yes, Node.js, since it is built upon JavaScript, the extension for Node.js file is also .js. Fine. So we'll see an example of a common uh, task, that is opening a file on the server, okay, with Node.js. So on a web server, we are trying to open a file, and then we are trying to return some content on the client web browser. Okay, so in order to do that in PHP, so this is a plotting of difference between how PHP and Node.js works. Okay, so if we are working with PHP, the sequence of events will be something like this. So we are sending the task to the computer's file system in order to open a file. Then PHP code will wait while the file system opens and reads the file content, and then it returns the content to the client web browser. Okay, and then it is again ready to handle the next request. Fine. Whereas in the case of Node.js, once you have sent the task to the computer's file system to read the content, immediately uh, it is ready to handle the next incoming request. Okay, it does not wait for the file system to open and read and then generate a response. But immediately, once it has handed over the task to the computer's file system, immediately it is ready to handle the next request. And then once the file is opened and the content is read, then the server content can be finally returned to the client browser. Okay, so that is the difference between Node.js and PHP or ASP code, or the working principle. So what it does, it benefits us by eliminating the waiting time, and it continues to serve the subsequent client requests. Okay, so the waiting time is uh, completely eliminated for the subsequent requests. Also, it runs in a single threaded way, in a non-blocking way, and asynchronously, which will definitely improve your memory efficiency as far as the server side memory is concerned. Okay, fine. Here's a small example in which we are sending a hello world response from the Node.js page. Okay, so firstly, this is a Node.js code. That means the .js file that you have created. It will have, firstly, since we are generating HTTP, or we are handling HTTP requests, we will have to load the HTTP module. Okay, to load any module in Node.js, we will use the require function. Okay, we require that module. So we are loading the HTTP module, and then reference for that module is stored in HTTP variable, for example. Then after that, we need to create a server object. So we'll be able to create the server object with the help of this create server function, HTTP or whatever variable name you took, that dot create server, and then the function is having two objects, request object and response object. Then we will have to define the HTTP header. So for example, if we don't define this HTTP header, then what will happen? Simply the information will be printed on the client side, but it will not be displayed as a HTML information. It will just be a plain information. Okay, but we want to display the response on the client side in the HTTP format. Sorry, in the HTML format, right? That is why we have to define the HTTP header by using write header, write head method of the response. Okay, so here 200 is the code which will specify that yes, everything is okay, and we can load the content whatever we are passing from here. Okay, so 200 stands for everything is all right. Okay, and then we will specify the object, the HTML object, which will specify what type of content we are displaying. So it is text slash HTML. The content type is text slash HTML. Fine. Now, once we have specified the content type, then we can actually write the response page, right? So we'll use the write function, response.write function, and specify whatever HTML code we have to specify in the write function. And then finally, we will end the response. Okay. Suppose our response lies in some variable, right? Suppose my hello world statement lies in some text variable, then the name of that variable will come over here, okay, as an argument for the end function, right? So whatever server object we created with the help of this create server function, whatever server object was created, that server object is continuously listening on this 8080 port. Okay, so that object dot listen function is continuously listening on which port? On this 8080 port, since we are handling HTTP requests. Okay, and once a request comes, we'll generate this response. Understood? So yeah, we have another example over here of accessing the URL components. So for example, we are having a URL and we want to access the URL parameters, right? So in order to do that, we will require another module which is called as URL. So we get the URL module with the require function. Other steps are the same. Here we use the parse function. So whatever request we had, we are accessing the URL of that request over here, and we are generating an object queue. Now what this object queue will have, whatever parameters are present in this URL, it will parse that URL and create variables for this, or create data members in this object. Okay, like year is one URL parameter and month is another URL parameter. So we are creating a string which is having the year space the month, and this string is stored in txt, and then we are finally displaying that value over here by passing it to the end function. You can see the output over here. Suppose we are having this URL, localhost 8080, year is one URL parameter and month is another URL parameter. So this entire URL is parsed, and URL parameter and their corresponding values are stored in this queue object. Okay, and then you can see we have displayed the year and the month over here with this txt variable. Got it? So these were small examples of Node.js code. We can generate a response through the Node.js code.